What is up, my magic nerds? Fuego here, and we are just coming off a weekend of pre-release tournaments for Modern Horizons 3, and I got to play a few, so I just thought I would share my decks that I played and my thoughts on some of the cards, and let's just dig right on in. We'll start with the first arena code. Grab it. It's yours. First come. Boom. Alright, so this deck, we'll start with the one that did the worst, but I felt the best about. I had higher hopes for this. It went 2-2. But let's take a look. The Fanatic of Ronus is a great card. I was stoked to get it. I mean, if you're playing a big creature type deck, Eldrazi or Beasts or anything large, you're going to get a lot of value out of the 4-mana dork, the mana dork. And the Eternalize is great because even if you have to discard it or it gets killed, you still have an option to bring it back and get that 4 mana. So this was great. The whole point of this deck was to make Eldrazi spawn and ramp a little bit to get to some of the bigger creatures, bigger spells. So we got Fanatic of Ronus. Emrakul's Messenger. I mean, realistically, I get a body, it's a flyer, and it gives me an Eldrazi spawn. And honestly, flying really seemed like a winning strategy against most things. Another mana dork. Give me a body to block. 0-4 is good. And gives me those colorless pips that we need for some of the spells and Eldrazi. And I got 2 of those. The Nyxborn Hydra was actually solid. I mean, I never bestowed it, I just played it as a creature. And a lot of the blue removal seemed to be, and blue and maybe some of the white, seemed to be make your creature like a 1-1. I think it was the blue one that I saw most often. Make your creature a 1-1, which doesn't really affect this very much. I mean, it takes away the reach and trample, because it loses its abilities, but it keeps all the +1 counters. And I had 2 different opponents use that against the Hydra, which just made it slightly bigger. So, for whatever that's worth, this really hits the 1-1 counter synergy that was in the set. And the Nyxborn Hydra, very solid, carried its weight. Eldrazi Repurposer. I mean, you get a 3-3 for 3 plus the Eldrazi spawn, which is solid. This just felt like a very solid card. Serum Visionary. I mean, it just does things that blue likes to do. You draw some cards, or you draw a card, you scry, and you get a body. It was perfectly fine. This one I almost didn't include, but the Whale straight up won me games. Vanishing 2, whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, Proliferate. Well, there wasn't a ton of Proliferate that I had or saw, but getting a 7-5 for 3 just felt good enough that I threw it in. And it turns out getting to attack once is fine, but if you save up a couple of cheap spells and play a few during your turn, you Proliferate, and you get to keep this around a little longer. This was a legitimate threat that people had to answer early on, and was fantastic. So Dreamtide Whale was very solid. Annoyed Altasaur. I whiffed most of the time on the Cascade because this is a sealed deck and not like something I constructed around. But it's just value. You get a big body, reach and trample, great, and then the Cascade for something for free. So I love playing dinosaurs. I think Dinosaur is a great tribe. Annoyed Altasaur carried its weight. Warp Tusker. And again, this is one of the larger creatures that I was trying to ramp into, but the payoff isn't great. You just get Eldrazi spawn, which is fine, but really I was just trying to ramp into larger bodies. And then this guy was a star. First of all, Emerge is pretty broken if you have the colorless pips, which the land cycle in this set gives you the option if you're not going to go fetch for one of your colored mana. Gives you the option for the colorless. The emerge is great. Makes this cheap. And when you cast this spell, tap up to 2 target permanents and put stun counters on each of them, which is fantastic. That gives you a free turn, sometimes 2, to get some attacks in. And it does say just target permanent, so I did have one time where somebody only had 1 threat out and nothing else. So I tapped that and one of their lands just to keep the land stunned, which is an option. Twisted Riddle Keeper was phenomenal, and that's kind of what I was going for. I was going for a couple of those big boys, the Dinosaur, the Riddle Keeper. Kozilek's Command did great work every time I cast it. You just have to have the colorless to make it work. But with the Eldrazi spawn I'm making is good. And then this gives you lots of options. It was just hard to figure out which was best for my scenario. Do I want to exile a creature? Do I want to scry and draw? The scry and draw is very solid, especially if you've ramped up and you have mana dorks and you have a bunch of mana to throw into it. Because sometimes I was digging like 8 deep and picking a card from among them, which is phenomenal. So it's find your answer and make a bunch of Eldrazi spawn. Collective Resistance. This is just a general answer. It gives you a lot of options. Protect your something or destroy their something. So Collective Resistance, I love a flexible card. This is one of the MDFCs, which is just fine. Again, protect your stuff, make it bigger, +1 counter strategy is solid. Gift of the Viper is a crazy good card. You just get tons of upside for 1 green at instant speed, +1 counter, reach, death touch, and untap. So this is just an easy grab if you're doing a draft and you're thinking of going green. This is such an easy grab. This is one of the best battle tricks that can really turn the tide. Just hitting way above 1 mana, you know? Unfathomable Truth. So 5 is a little steep, but you're drawing 3 cards and create an Eldrazi spawn, which can be a body if you need it as a blocker or a chump, or mana ramp if you need it to get out some of the bigger stuff and refill your hand. So got a couple of those. Signature Slam fits into the +1 counter strategy and is basically a one-sided fight card. So 3 mana is a little heavy for a fight card, but when you add the extra power that you're throwing on, and then if you have other stuff with +1 counters, you can actually take out something really big. Horrific Assault, I love it. The art is cool, the art is wicked. 1 green, and it's again one-sided fight, and if you have an Eldrazi you gain 3 life. Well, I've usually got some Eldrazi spawn early game and hopefully one of the big ones late, so it seems like a good deal for 1 green. Malevolent Rumble, this is just dig early game. Hopefully grab whatever you need for 2 mana and create an Eldrazi spawn. Fits into the strategy. Fangs of Colonia. Put a +1 counter on target creature you control, then double the number of +1 counters on each creature that had a +1 counter put on it this way, with the overload. I never got a chance to overload it, but it was fine. Again, I kind of was leaning into a little bit of the +1 strategy. Another Horrific Assault. This is the one that I saw quite a bit. A flash, creature loses all abilities and has base power and toughness 1/1. The part that me and my opponents both missed a bunch was the exile enchanted creature. So you can throw it on and you can exile it to avoid them bouncing it or getting rid of this enchantment. And so I watched my opponents make lots of mistakes by not exiling my creature, and I could still get some of its benefit from it or bounce it or something like that. in other games, but solid card, but yeah. Colossal Dread Mask. This kind of fit into the other creatures. I didn't have a lot of creatures in the deck. Unfortunately, I was just working towards getting some of the bombs. But this itself is a bomb. So you drop it for 6, you get a 6/6 with trample, solid threat, and if somebody kills it, it just kind of becomes an artifact equipment that you can just throw onto anything else and give that +6/+6 in trample. So this felt like a good card. I mean, it was definitely a later game card, but again, I was doing Eldrazi spawn trying to get to the big stuff. Emerald Medallion. It didn't carry a ton of weight in this. I used it a bit, but every time I drew it later in the game, I kind of wish I had a different card. But early, if I have it in my opening hand, it does feel very, very good. Just green spells costing 1 less. Feels great. Drops, my dinosaur and a lot of the other spells down a bit, but it didn't do exactly what I wanted in the deck. And this is the land cycle that is just great. So we have tri-fetches, which is great. I love it. And it gives you the colorless pip that you need for a lot of the stuff in the set. And then just a handful of basics. So that was my Eldrazi spawn. Try to get to some of the bigger spells, bigger creatures. And not great. I ran into a lot of decks playing Energy. Energy seemed to be fairly broken. The people who were playing it leaned heavily into it. And honestly, when Energy came out, it was a pretty broken mechanic. It gives you a whole extra resource to pull from. So I get it. Like, I'm actually happy that they're playing more, giving us more Energy cards. So the next deck, which we'll just jump to the Arena Code. If you missed the first one, quickly grab the second. Boom. So the second one, I went a different direction based on what I pulled. And we're starting with Tamiyo, which I was stoked to get that. So she reads, when she attacks, investigate, and when you draw your third card in a turn, flip her. +2 until your next turn, whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, it gets -1. So a little bit of protection. Return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. If it's a green card, add 1 mana of any color. So you get a little recursion for spells from your graveyard. And then I was lucky enough one game to actually ult her. Draw cards equal to half the number of cards in your library. Rounded up, you get an emblem with you have no maximum hand size. So I ended up getting to ult her at one point, and I think I drew like 12 or 13 cards. It was a good way into the game. And it felt really good. I was up, I was fighting an uphill battle, but just the fact that I had so much card advantage definitely went good in the end. This deck I went 3-1, and the only round I lost was to the first place person, so I can't be that mad. They did really good, so they built a great deck. Very aggro. And I was stoked with this. So Tamiyo, absolute bomb, 1 mana, 0/3 flyer that flips into good stuff. Triton Wavebreaker. Let's see. The Bestow, which actually works really well in this deck. As long as it's a creature, it has prowess. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has prowess. I just needed some early drops, and enchantment auras work in this. I kind of went with an energy enchantment kind of vibe with this. The Shrieking Drake enters the battlefield. Return a creature you control to its owner's hand. Doesn't seem that good as a 1-drop 1/1 flyer that makes you return another creature. But with that blue, and there's several spells that or enchantments that lock down your creature, make it not able to attack or block, or turn it into a 1/1. Shrieking Drake comes out and saves you from that. Lets you bounce that creature back to your hand and replay it. So it's kind of, it's a 1 mana get out from underneath an oppressive enchantment, and then you also have a little flyer body. So perfectly fine. Tempest Harvester, get some energy. Pay an energy, draw a card, then discard. So this helps me flip Tamiyo, because I want to draw cards in this deck for Tamiyo, and I want to make energy, so this does both, and I got a couple of that. Glyph Elemental, this is the landfall. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1 counter on Glyph Elemental, and enchanted creature gets +1 for each +1 on Glyph Elemental with the bestow. So again, this is great. I'm hopefully playing lands a lot of turns, so this gets big, it gets out of control. Nyxborn Unicorn, +2/+2 and Mentor. Solid. I mean, I just was filling out my enchantment roster, and a 2/2 for 2 is fine with Mentor, and then you can bestow it, make a creature good. Love this guy. Riddlegate Gargoyle. ETBs get 3 energy, and whenever you attack, you may pay 2 energy. When you do, target creature you control gains lifelink until end of turn. Great thing is, he doesn't have to attack, just whenever you attack, you can pay 2 energy. And if I'm banking a bunch of energy, really any of my creatures, if I attack, I pay 2 energy, give them lifelink. And I remember at one point this one got locked down under an enchantment, but it retained its abilities, so it just couldn't attack or block. But I still had energy, and I could still give stuff lifelink, and that disappointed my opponent who didn't realize that was the case. Now we're talking Envoy of the Ancestors. Modified creatures you control have lifelink. So already 2/3 for 3 with Outlast, perfectly fine. But giving all of my stuff that has a +1 counter on it, or enchanted or whatever, lifelink is amazing. This is an amazing uncommon, and I would snag it from any draft. There's just so many things in this set that put +1 counters on or enchant stuff that, and lifelink is one of the best just evergreen abilities, so love it. Solstice Zealot. When it ETBs, you get 2 energy, pay an energy, tap a creature. This saved my ass against some of the bigger Eldrazi and bigger bombs. When I finally got this out, I'm able to just, once a turn, stop their Annihilator BS. I remember just going against somebody who was making me sack stuff over and over again. I get this guy out, I don't have to worry about it anymore. I've got plenty of energy, and I'm tapping their stuff every time, not allowing that attack trigger to happen. Inspired Inventor. ETBs, you either get 3 energy, put a +1 counter on a creature, or create a servo token. Every time, not every time, most of the time I was putting a counter on something, but if I had a good energy outlet, I would get energy. This again is just flexible. So whatever your strategy is, this fits with 3 different strategies. So again, a solid pull, solid pickup. Hope Ender Coatl. Didn't do a lot for me. Most of the time they had the 1 to pay. It's hard to wait to find the exact right time to play this, but it is a 2/2 flash flyer, and flying is what won me a lot of these games. So just having flyers was absolutely crucial. Speaking of which, Electrozoa, again, another flash flyer, a 3/1 that gives me 2 energy, and beginning of pre-combat main phase, tap it unless you pay 1. Well, I almost always have the 1. I have a lot of stuff that makes energy, so solid. Pearl Ear Imperial Advisor. 3/4 lifelink. enchantment spells I cast have affinity for auras. Whenever I cast an aura spell that targets a modified permanent I control, draw a card. Honestly, this would be a great commander. I could absolutely see somebody building around this, but it also totally worked in this deck with all the bestow enchantment kind of things I had and +1 counter stuff. So, solid card. I didn't see it enough, but I know this is a very solid card. Corrupted Shapeshifter. This was great. Having flexibility is good. You can either get a 3/3 flyer, a 2/5 with vigilance, or a 0/12 with defender. And my first thought is, who's picking the 0/12 wall? But with how many giant-ass creatures there are in this set, if I was facing one and I needed an answer to stop getting hit for 8 or whatever, or 7, you could definitely pick the 0/12 wall and do just fine absorbing that damage. But every time I played it, I picked a 3/3 flyer, and it totally did the work it needed to do. So, stoked with Corrupted Shapeshifter. Area Auxiliary, great card. Again, a 3/3 flyer. This won me games. When it ETBs, you support 2, put some +1 counters on your other stuff, and love every second of it. So, Area Auxiliary, totally good. Speaking of totally good, we've got Genku, Future Shaper, this Moonfolk Wizard, a 2/5 for 4, and whenever another non-token permanent I control leaves the battlefield, I choose one of these tokens to make that hasn't been chosen this turn. And so, basically, every time they remove something, I get something else. And it is fantastic. This worked really good with Annihilator. I had this out, somebody hit me with an Annihilator thing, I had to sack a couple lands, but in the place of those lands, I got some little flyers. And they were surprised that this still triggered off of everything, and this worked great against Annihilator. So, I was stoked with Genku Future Shaper. This is a great card, in Limited for sure. Probably there's some good EDH thoughts there, but for Limited, it was great. Another good little battle trick, just 2/2, and then put a flying counter on something. And what the heck, go ahead and scry 1. Why not? This was fine. I saw a few of these. That's just fine. Orm's Chant, very situational. Target player can't cast spells this turn. If it was kicked, they can't attack this turn. I used this a couple of times. It's mostly when you're on the ropes and you just need one more turn to kind of balance things out. So you do this on their upkeep and make sure that they can't bring out a new blocker or a new threat, and make sure that they can't swing in for lethal with you. And it just kind of gives you one turn. For 2 white mana, you get 1 turn of breathing room. Orm's Chant, very solid, but pretty situational. And again, I want to draw cards. I've got a Tameo, and I want to draw cards. Same thing with the Unfathomable Truth. Razor Grass Ambush, another MDFC, and it's easy. It's direct damage in white for attacking or blocking with a little bit of flexibility. Tune the Narrative, good. Draw a card, get energy. I want to do both of those things, and this is an instant 1-drop. So, yes, I want to draw a card, I want energy. That fits into everything I'm doing. Jolted Awake, if you're running energy at all, this is phenomenal. Choose up to 1 target artifact or creature card in your graveyard, get 2 energy, then pay an amount of energy equal that card's mana value. If you do, return it from the graveyard to the battlefield. This is great. They get rid of my Genku or my Mentor or something that's good. For 1 mana and a little bit of energy, I get it back. And I usually had a decent pool of energy, so Jolted Awake did some good heavy lifting and was stoked with that. Suppression Rays, phenomenal. This is a great card. Another MDFC, dual color. Tap all creatures target player controls and then pay X energy. choose up to X creatures, tap this way, and put a stun counter on each of them. So this is another one that gives you some breathing room. It either taps everything to let you get in for lethal, or if they're pummeling you, it lets you tap and stun them so they can't hit you the next turn, and it gives you a chance to take care of business, balance things out, play your own stuff. Suppression Ray can easily be a game winner, and I think, yeah, it was phenomenal. And it's flexible. I never used it as a land because it's too good as a spell. Deem Inferior, it's just an answer. Didn't really use it very much. Some people used it against me, which was annoying, but 4 mana or costs 1 less for each card you've drawn. Owner of target non-land permanent puts it into their library second from the top or on the bottom. So it tucks things. It's fine. It's a solid answer, if I'm being honest. I just didn't get a chance to use it very much. Solar Transformer. Basically 2 mana, get 3 energy, and have a mana rock. It gives me the colorless pip that I sometimes want, gives me energy that I always want, and then it gives me a little mana fixing. This is pretty freaking solid. I would pick this up in a draft if I'm running multicolor, I don't know which direction I'm going. This would be a good draft card for sure. And then of course we have our fetch lands, our new fetch lands, and then a handful of basics. But yeah, this deck actually did surprisingly well, mostly with flyers and just kind of battles of attrition. I got to draw more cards, I got to use energy to my advantage, and I had flyers to get around their stuff. So this one went 3-1. I was really stoked with that result. But this was a super fun set. I'm really excited about this set. I can't wait to throw some of these into my constructed decks. And I hope you all have fun drafting it. Get out there and get some games in. Thanks for hanging out with me. This has been long enough. I'll catch you on the next one. Ciao.